When you picture Vermont, what do you see? I'm guessing it's probably something peaceful, right? Kinda idyllic. Well, underneath that postcard-perfect surface, there's this whole other side, a current of strangeness full of grand ghosts and weird wonders that tell a totally different story. And that's what we're going to dive into. See, you've got the Vermont everybody knows and loves. The maple syrup, the gorgeous green mountains, those classic little white church steeples. But then there's the other Vermont, a kind of secret history that's hiding in plain sight, a place filled with lake monsters, cursed land, and some seriously vengeful ghosts. It's a place where all this folklore is just woven right into the landscape itself.
So what's the deal? How did this quiet, unassuming New England state become such a hotspot for the strange and the supernatural? That's the big question here, right? And we're going to try to answer it by looking at some of its most famous and most unsettling tales.
All right, let's start with what might be lurking in the water. We're heading to one of the biggest and most famous lakes in the entire country, a place that's home to a legend that's, well, just as deep as its waters.
So we're talking about Lake Champlain. For centuries, people have claimed to see something incredible here. They call it Champ. And with over 300 reported sightings over the years, this isn't just some silly story. It's a huge part of the local folklore. I mean, this legend has fascinated everyone from Iroquois storytellers all the way to P.T. Barnum.
Now, the most compelling piece of evidence, the thing that really gets people talking, is this photograph from 1977, taken by a woman named Sandra Monzi. And it seems to show exactly what you'd think a lake monster would look like, this long, snake-like neck breaking the surface. For believers, this was it. This was the smoking gun.
But hold on, because here's where the mystery really gets tricky. Skeptics point out two major problems. First, the bay where the photo was supposedly taken, it's only about 14 feet deep, which is hardly enough water for a giant creature like that to hide in. And second, Manson threw away the original negative, which makes it totally impossible to analyze the image for any signs of fakery. So, what are we really looking at? A monster or just a weird-looking log?
Okay, so from monsters in the water, let's head up onto dry land. Because if you think a lake monster is strange, just you wait until you hear about Vermont's most famous ghost.
So here we are. This is the Gold Brook Bridge in Stowe, a classic New England covered bridge built way back in 1844. But here's the thing, almost nobody calls it that. To locals and ghost hunters, this is, and always will be, Emily's Bridge, named for the heartbroken spirit that's said to haunt the place.
So the legend goes that a young woman named Emily was supposed to run off with her lover, but he never showed up. Absolutely devastated, she took her own life right here at the bridge. And ever since, people who visit have reported some really terrifying stuff. Hearing cries out of nowhere, feeling these intense cold spots, and, this is the most famous part, finding deep scratches clawed into their cars by who knows what.
But here comes the twist. The Stowe Historical Society, they looked into it, and there is absolutely no historical record of an Emily, or anyone really, meeting a tragic end on or even near this bridge. The entire foundation of this super famous ghost story, it just isn't there.
So, how does a ghost story without a ghost even get started? Well, one theory is that a local woman just made the whole thing up in the 70s to spook some kids, and it took on a life of its own. Another idea is that it's a kind of confused memory of a real tragedy from the 1920s, where a young girl did fall from a different covered bridge nearby, one that's not even there anymore. So maybe the ghost story just kind of drifted to a new location.
All right, so we've got a maybe monster and a probably not real ghost. Now, let's zoom out from a single haunted spot to an entire region that's known for this feeling of unexplained dread. Welcome to the area that people call the Bennington Triangle. It's centered on Glastonbury Mountain, and this place, it has a dark reputation. Between 1920 and 1950, at least 5 people walked into these woods and just vanished, without a trace. No bodies, no clues, nothing. And when you look at the timeline, it gets even weirder. The whole area was already kind of declining. Old logging towns were literally becoming official ghost towns in 1937. And then, between 1945 and 1950, there was this sudden burst of disappearances that shocked the whole state. The most famous was an 18-year-old college student named Paula Jean Weldon. And then, just as suddenly as it all began, it stopped. Okay, quick recap. We have a lake monster with some shaky evidence, a famous ghost with no actual history, and a creepy patch of land where people vanish.
On the surface, they all seem like totally separate weird stories, right? But what if they're not? What if there's one single thread that ties all of Vermont's weirdness together?
And this, right here, is where it all starts to make sense. The answer isn't hiding in the woods or at the bottom of a lake. It's in the people who tell the stories.
You see, for over 30 years, Vermont's entire alternate history, this whole collection of dark, strange tales, has been systematically collected, and you could even say shaped, by one person in particular.
That man is author and folklorist Joseph A. Citro. And remember that super spooky Bennington Triangle? The name that sounds like some ancient curse? Yeah, that wasn't some old legend. Citro himself just made up the phrase on a radio broadcast back in 1992 to describe that cluster of disappearances. He basically created the legend's modern identity.
And what's so fascinating is Citro's mission. He's not out there trying to prove that any of this stuff is real. His whole goal is to preserve the stories themselves, to make sure that the legends of Champ and Emily and the Vanishing Hikers get passed down. You could say he's an architect of Vermont's modern folklore.
And that brings us to the real heart of it all, doesn't it? The stories of Champ and Emily's Bridge are still around, not because there's hard evidence, but because they're just powerful tales. The Bennington Triangle is terrifying not just because people disappeared, but because an author gave that fear a name and a shape. The true magic here is the act of storytelling itself.
So, what do you think? Is Vermont this uniquely haunted place, a land where monsters and ghosts really are lurking in the shadows? Or is it something even more interesting? A place that has this deep cultural understanding of just how powerful a good story can be, and how important it is to keep those legends alive for the next generation to discover and to fear.